Right, hello and welcome to today's HCM course session for the Workday 2022 Release 1 webinar. Please bear in mind that this presentation does not cover all features that are to be released. And if you wish for more details regarding the new features that are not covered today, I refer to the Workday community pages, or feel free to contact me or one of my colleagues and we can help you further. My name is Joachim Engelin and I will be the presenter. I come from an HR admin background and have several years of experience working in HR operations team here in Sweden as an end user of the Workday tool. Last year, I changed paths in my career and wanted to learn more about Workday and also what the tool can provide other organizations. I have a Workday HCM course certification, and I hope that you will find today's session helpful. Before we begin, I want to highlight some webinar practicalities. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, and my colleagues and I, if we have time available, will address them later. If we don't have time after the presentation and we don't have an answer, we will get back to you via email. The session is recorded and will be shared later on, and the slide decks are available for downloading. Also, don't forget to join our Digital HR Insider for keeping up with the latest trends and information regarding the HR digitalization journey. Before going into the key features of this release, I would like to mention the safe harbor statement, which you should be pretty aware of. For those who are not aware, in short, things can change and the features presented today, as well as the content that Workday provides for the future of the product, can be subject for change. Right, so the agenda for today. I will cover some topics in a little bit more detail and other topics in more high-level fashion. I'll start with the key features of the upcoming release, followed by the Workday 2021 R2 Plus features, ending with a short list of other features and then the future roadmap ahead before ending today's session. Depending on my ability for time management, we might not be able to cover all topics, but the information that is presented here today is available in the slide deck, which you can then download. So let's get the first topic of today, which is the hide and require optional fields for contract. So in the employee contracts, you can now decide to hide or require contract fields by country and role. Configurations are done in the task configure optional fields, and the changes reflects on the employment agreement as well as the employee contract web services. With this new feature, additional functional areas are added as well. So to configure and utilize this feature with the hide and require, you go to the optional fields task. You then, in the different functional areas, choose to hide or require the fields that you want to configure. And the changes does not follow or copy over to the other functional areas, so you need to repeat the steps for each functional area. Here's also a description of the functional areas and where they are displayed in the system. For the demo, I will only show the employee contract functional area, which is the actual employee contracts event, just so you can get a look and feel of how it is. So let me demo it. So here is the GMS tenant, and I'm logged in as Logan. So let me go into the worker Margaret Granger, and I'll basically just try to add a contract here. So let's add a contract for today's effective date. And as you can see here, we have the date employee sign as well as date employer sign. So let me try to hide it. So I'll go into the config optional field, and then I'll go into the employee contract. There we go. And then I choose to add new fields, and the date employee sign as well as date employer sign. And let me hide it for all, just for the demonstration purposes. You can also require it for all or hide it per security group. So let me hide it for all. Done. And going back to the Margaret Granger's profile, I'll go and add a contract. And as you can see here, we have hidden the date signature for employer signature as well as employee signature. Okay, so that was a quick first demo, not so painful. Some additional considerations. Configurations are required for each separate functional area, as I mentioned before. The configuration only hides the fields, so it doesn't inactivate the use of the fields. And if you use validations on, for example, the employee contract business process, the validations will still work. However, you need to consider if you hide something that is then required in the contract validation, then it might be a bit tricky. If you also use the auto sequence generator for generating contract ID, and you choose to hide the field, it will still generate a number. However, you cannot require the field contract ID, since the field needs to be blank in order for the contract ID to be generated. So in summary then, it is now possible to hide and require the fields in contract details. You need to configure to make it happen, and if you decide not to opt in, then basically no changes will happen. Also mentioning that validations on the business process employee contract will still be relevant and functioning. Moving on to the next new feature, which is the name pronunciation on profiles. So it is now possible for workers to add their name pronunciation on their own worker profile. This is to improve and foster an inclusive environment, especially within global organizations where local names can be pronounced differently. What is new is a new business process definition called name pronunciation. Also new reporting fields added, as well as new security domains to secure the name pronunciation fields. To set this up, following actions needs to be done. So you need to create the new business process definition. You also need to configure the security policy around it, as well as the security in the name pronunciation domain. Last but not least, you need to access the maintain localization settings task and activate it for the country that you want this to be displayed in. You can also optionally add a help text if required. You can also configure additional steps in the business process, for instance, adding an approval. And you can also override the field label using the maintain custom labels task. So let me show you a demo of the feature. I have configured as per the earlier slide, activated the business process. So let's just do the maintain localization settings. And I'll go into the personal information. Oh, we have it there. And let me just filter on phonetic pronunciation. So I've allowed this for the countries of Canada and United States of America here in the GMS tenant. And I've also added an HR admin approval in the business process definition. So let me show you this feature then. We have James Mason. So I will start proxy as James. And now I want to demo James adding the name pronunciation to his own profile. So James can either go into his profile, go to related actions, and under personal data, I've enabled the change my name pronunciation task. It is also possible for him to find the task using the search bar, change my name pronunciation to trigger the process, and then he can add the phonetic name pronunciation. So let me just James Mason. So this is what James thinks that his name is to be pronounced. And once James has submitted, goes to Logan for approval. So let me go to Logan real quick. I find this way easier and faster to start proxy as Logan, even though I am logged in as Logan. So here we have the approval step, where the HR admin can review the details of the phonetic pronunciation. Logan can say, okay, approve, send back, or deny in case something is not right, but let's approve this. And then in James, let's go here, James. You can then see here his phonetic pronunciation under his full name. And that was the end of the second demo. Some additional considerations are that the new term on the maintain custom labels will be visible first in production. Currently, this phonetic name is only available for workers in HCM Core. It is also not possible to search using the phonetic name, and you must maintain localization settings to enable countries, otherwise the fields will not be visible. So in summary then, you can now add name pronunciation on worker's profile. And if you choose to configure this, you need to follow following steps. And if you choose to do nothing, then nothing will happen. Basically, you need to enable this feature. Okay. And the next feature is the full-time equivalent on position restrictions. And as you may have experienced before, when creating positions or editing position restrictions, the fields for full-time equivalent with the default weekly hours as well as the scheduled weekly hours are not available. For the new release, it is now possible to enable the fields to be visible. So when creating or viewing a position, you can now enable the fields to be visible. The fields behave similarly as with the default hours in the hire process or staffing processes. In other words, they can default based on existing location time profiles. And when initiating a hire process, it is possible to override the FTE values of the position restrictions. And with this new feature, new reporting fields are available for the FTE data on positions as well. The configuration is as easy as going into the edit tenant setup HCM task and then just tick the box enable FTE for position restrictions and then you're done basically. So let me show you a demo of the position or the FTE values. So I can show you the positions task as Logan. So let me just start creating a position. So here we can see that we don't have that particular FTE fields visible. So let me enable it. So I'll go into HCM setup and scrolling down to the staffing part. And here we have the enable FTE for position restrictions, and I'll tick the box. Okay. And I'll run the task again. Create position. And as you can see here, we have gotten the default weekly hours as well as scheduled weekly hours. And the logic here is that when you choose a location that has a time profile added, it will get defaulted in. And if the default weekly hours for the location is 40 hours and the worker is scheduled for 20 hours, then it will be 20 through 40, which is 50%. And should this worker, let's go back to the defaulted hours, and should we then choose a part-time, the scheduled weekly hours will drop to 0. So you don't forget to add any scheduled weekly hours. So this was how to enable the FT fields to be visible, and just show you how it is in the system. So some additional considerations for staffing business processes like hiring or contracting contingency workers. The scheduled and weekly hours are not defaulted of the positions restriction, only when there is no work hours profile or job rec for the position. Also, currently the FTE value of the position restriction doesn't follow when creating a job rec based on the position. And in addition, you can also configure the optional fields and make the FTE values required. So in summary, it is now possible to enable the FTE fields for positions in order to keep track of the open positions. This is done in the edit tenant setup HCM task, and if you choose to do nothing, then the FTE fields will not be visible. And next topic is the Workday docs that is now for HCM business processes. And Workday has now enabled Workday docs to be used when generating documents for the HCM business processes. Previously, it was only possible to use Workday docs functionality for recruitment, but now Workday is supporting the Workday docs templates for these additional business processes. And to give you some background, if you don't know what Workday Docs is, first of all, it requires the Drive product in order to use the Workday Docs functionality. And what Workday Docs is kind of like a Word-like document template generator where you can add fields from Workday. You can also set up a, what is it called? I lost the word there, but you can configure so that one particular field doesn't show up using a rule, and then no BERT template or BERT experience is required, since this is only done in the Drive product. And in order to configure the use of Workday Docs, you need to set up Drive security. You then need to configure the docs domain with the relevant security groups. Then simply create or edit document templates directly in Drive, and then assign these to the business process document generation action. And for this demo now, I will not configure any business processes, but I will give you a short demo of the touch and feel of Workday Docs. And perhaps if you're not using it already, might consider opting in on this solution, since it is now enabled for the HCM business processes, which can be used for generating employment agreements, for instance, directly in the system. So let me access the drive for Logan. And here I have prepared a template. Just see, condition rules was the word I was looking for. But let me get back to that. So here I have prepared, I've inserted a picture, uploading it from my computer. It's basically, if you have used Google Docs, it's very similar. So you can insert images, you can insert tables. For instance, here is a table that I've used to separate the date and signature lines for a possible e-signing. And these fields that are marked as green are ones that will be based on Workday data. So also this particular example is not a 100% legitimate employment agreement, but this is only for demo purposes. And for the condition ruling, what I've done here with this particular section that is about collective agreements is that I've made it only visible for countries that has location proposed in Denmark, Finland, Norway, or Sweden. So if the worker is not part of these countries, this will then be hidden and not be part of the document. And I have added this template to the business process of employee contract. So let me show you how it is in the system with the data dragged in from Workday. So I'll go in I'll go into Ashanti Singh's profile, and I'll just trigger the business process for adding a contract. So let's add a contract, just demoing this. Open. And the contract start date will be the effective date, as she has no contract as of now. And when I trigger this, it should generate a document for employee contract. And here we have the review step where we can see the contract that is generated. In this view, you can also edit, add text if required, or change or update text if required. As you can see here, the parties, Global Modern Services, is based on her worker profile, as well as her name, the location, and the contract start date. The part about the collective agreement is not visible, as I have configured the condition ruling or added the condition ruling. That. Okay, so this is the Workday Docs now for HCM business processes. Some additional considerations is that all templates currently uses the Roboto font. Character rendering in non-Latin languages may be unreliable, and you can't translate versions of the same template, so you need to create a separate copy that you need to update separately, since the content isn't linked between two documents, so you need to update them separately. So what is changing now? Workday Docs is enabled for the HCM business processes, and this means that you now can add this to the business processes in the generate document action. And previously used non-Workday Docs templates will continue to function in the normal way. Right. Next topic is a feature that was pushed from the previous release, Workday 2021R2 release. It wasn't visible in the what's new report that is available in the tenant, but it was posted in the what's new post on the community. What this is with this feature, you're now able to insert, add, or change an organization assignment event in between other events. So there's no need to rescind any future events if you need to make any corrections. You can now do it directly in the worker history. The feature will also override any future data that is consecutive with the change up until the latest new value field of the correction. A bit tricky to follow, but I hope that my demo in a few minutes will clear it out. In addition, you need to enable this in order for it to work, and a new task is then created and available. So the new task is called maintain functionality for staffing transactions. To configure this feature, you need to run a new task and enable the functions, and then you can choose to limit it to the security groups. The include all security groups option only includes the security groups that are currently activated and allowed to make corrections. So it will not override any policy or so on. So you can just choose to restrict it more to a certain security group within the correction. To be a bit more detailed before showing you the demo, the correct out of order event functionality correlates with the correct action in the worker history, whereas the insert out of order events correlates to the functionality change org assignment in related actions, as well as the mass action initiating action, both in the interface as well as the web services. But let me show you a demo so you know what I'm talking about. So let's go to the start page. I am logged in as Logan still, and let's go into Yolanda. If I managed yesterday to neutralize all of the settings, it should be the defaulted behavior now, or else we need to fix that. But in the worker history, if I sort by worker history by category and check the organizations, we have several organization assignments in the worker history of Yolanda. The first one was effective 1st of January 2001, followed by corrections up here. These particular ones are not any new updates. So the same values here, Mexico, 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 up until 2021, where it is US Central as the region. And then it is US Central all the way up. But if I try to correct the first one, or anyone that isn't the last one, here we can see the defaulted behavior. So basically, you only have the possibility to correct the effective date and not the actual organizations itself. So let's enable this functionality then to correct the out of order events. So I'll go into the maintain functional staffing transactions. And then we choose the change org assignment for worker. And I'll add the functionality of correcting out of order event. And here I'll choose the all security groups. Here you can restrict the security groups to the ones that are already enabled. So if you just want a particular security group that is able to correct or do this action, you can then choose to restrict it. But for this demo, I'll choose the all security groups. And going back to Yolanda's worker history, I can go back to the first one here and business process correct. And then we have the possibility to correct the actual organizations. And this is a very powerful move, as with the new update also is the defaulted behavior of Workday updating all the consecutive values. So if I choose to change region here now to EU or change another organization, a new alert is popping up. And we can see this button here, view impacted events for more details. And here it is described all of the values that Workday will override with the new value that I'm correcting to. So we have the current value, which is the Mexico. And if I choose to update to EU Eastern, it will update all Mexican values, Mexico up until the first change here. So all Mexican values up until this one, since the next organization assignment is different, and then it will be that one. So it will only override the same one that you choose to correct. So let's cancel this. And let's check the other feature then. So I have a future event, which is the change org assignment from 1st of January 2023. And if I choose to update the organization assignment with effective date 1st of March this year, we will try to see what Workday behaves in the default settings. So in organization, I'll change org assignment. Let's go for 1st of March, and then Workday throws an error saying that there is a later org assignment, which means that I can't add anything or insert change org assignment in between two events. But let's enable this feature in the maintain functionality for staffing transactions. And I'll add a new row and insert the out of order event. I'll enable it for all security groups. And if I then go to organization, change org assignment, and choose the 1st of March, it is possible to do so. So here I can edit the organization assignments. And please bear in mind that this change here, if I update an organization, it will behave similarly. So it will update any future events. So it will override the future one with effective date 1st of January 2023 with this EU Eastern. As you can see here, it shows you that this will override. And what you can then do is that you can proceed with this change org assignment, go back into worker history, and then correct the latest event if you want to change back to the US Central. Okay. So, as said before, this particular feature was pushed back from last release and is now enabled for the upcoming Workday 2022R1 release. And since Workday is automatically correcting the future assigned org events, it is possible to manually correct the individual events as required. And the corrections are only done if the future events has the same value as the one that you are currently correcting. And if you have any condition rules set for the change org assignment business process definition, you need to update these condition rules to include the future dated events. Otherwise, it will not function properly. In addition, if you use Workday UK Payroll, please consider some limitations with this feature. Also, this feature isn't enabled for the change org assignment process when initiated through the Workday system, and also not functional when you initiate the process for multiple workers using the task change org assignment for workers. So it is only possible to insert using the related actions from the worker profile. In summary then, you can now insert and correct the data of the change org assignment event. You need to enable this feature using the new task. And if you choose to not enable this, you will still be able to make some corrections within the limitations as before. For instance, that you could correct the effective date. You can also correct the latest event. So for instance, if I were to correct the 1st of January 2023, I would be able to update all of the values there. So let's go into the next topic, which is staffing transactions in Org Studio. So for this upcoming release, there is new improvements in the Org Studio functionality. It is now possible to change business titles, propose terminations, as well as end contingency workers contracts using the Org Studio design. When performed, it will launch a mass action workbook that will then be processed in the system. To enable the new staffing transactions, you basically need to configure and enable these domains for these actions, and it is found under the organization and roles functional area under the parent policy, participate org design. And then you enable and edit the permissions. Show you if I just domain areas, and I'll just show you real quick. Roles. Under the parent policy, participate, and then we have terminate, which I've enabled here, as well as end contingency worker contract, which I have enabled here, and then the change business title. Next, let me show you the Org Studio interface where you can find then the related actions. So in the new global navigation menu, I have the app Org Studio. And let me create a demo Workday one. I can choose effective date, that one. And then I'll go with facilities group. So here in the Org Studio design for the facilities department within GMS, let's say that they have decided to invest in a new area and open positions for hiring. So under Christine here, I'll create a new subordinate organization. Let's call it Facilities Special, San Francisco Position Management and Group. Okay. And then under the new supervisor organization, I can then choose to create positions. So let me create facility specialists, and let's create 5 new positions. And as you can see here, the manager role or the inheritance logic is the same that applies within the Workday environment. And let's move a worker and assign it as a manager. So in Oscar Bell's team, we have Arnaud. So let's move Arnaud to Christine's team. So now he is located here, and then we can choose to assign roles. We can choose to assign role. We have it there. And then let's choose it here. And he becomes the manager. And let's update the business title. Head of Facility Special. Okay, so here his business title is updated. And in Catherine Gibson's team, we have the Mia marker and office manager. So under related actions here, we have the end contingent worker contract, and here you only choose the primary reason. So you don't add any particular values about the end contract. So unknown. And here we also have all of the activity displayed. And when I choose to review changes, it will be everything is here, which is the position management, new org created, org moved, as well as Arnaud was moved. 5 new positions were created. We have the role assignment where we assign the role of manager for Mr. Breton. We have ended the contract of Mia Marker, as well as changed the business title. And should you then choose to continue with this, it will then trigger a mass action workbook that can be processed and completed. Some additional considerations. Closing positions and making them available for overlap is not possible in the mass action workbook. You can, however, separately trigger a standalone close position event as part of the org design org studio. When processing the terminations, there might be some workday constraints that impacts the proposed effective dates. These can then be adjusted in the mass action worksheet before processing it. So all of the designs that you make in Org Studio are proposals, but then before actually making the changes in the system, you have the possibility to review all of the data and override it in the mass action workbook. Also, when it comes to validating the mass action workbook, the validations for termination and contract ending will prompt for missing values on the optional fields marked as required. Also, the record of employment details, which is required for Canadian employees. So in summary, it is now possible to terminate, change business title and end contingency worker contracts in Org Studio. You need to enable the feature by configuring the security domains. And if you choose to do nothing, then you will not have these features available. Also, an additional consideration, which I forgot to mention before, is that users that are now permissioned or users are now permissioned to reopen positions that they have previously closed within the Org Studio design, and this new thing is automatically enabled. So it's a change there in the security policy. Next topic. Yep.
Sorry, before you move on to the next topic, we get a really good question.
Okay.
So is the Org Studio something we have to enable and pay extra for?
From my understanding, yes. Can you please correct me if I'm wrong, Christina?
You have to enable it, but you don't have to pay extra for it. It's part of the HCM core package.
Okay, great. So there you have it, proof that I'm still a rookie. No, but thank you, Christina, for lifting this question. Good question.
Yes, you're welcome. And I'm a huge fan of Org Studio, by the way, so yeah, I'm very happy that there's new features in it.
Yeah, definitely. And with the new enhancements, it's also more things to do, and Org Studio is a really good tool for creating organization designs, especially if you want with the drag and drop feature, you get like the view of how it is in the end state. So it's also a good workshop thing to use instead of using all the Excel templates or Excel sheets. Anyhow, moving on to the next topic, which is enhancements in the custom organizations. In short, there are now some new functionalities when it comes to the membership rule performance, as well as the using of the rule. Static membership rules for custom organizations are now semi-dynamic by default. And note though that this doesn't affect dynamic rules associated with the custom organizations. A new error message is displayed when the proposed membership count exceeds 10,000 members. And there's also a new button to view existing and proposed members. These are all automatically available, so no configuration is required. An effective date or an effective as of column is added in the view membership tab of the custom organization. The effective date displayed is the effective date of the reorganization date used to link a rule to an organization. So it's not the current date. Lastly, you can now also collapse the members and the membership rules grids. Some additional considerations. So when it comes to the assign members using rule, firstly, the view members button displays as of the reorg effective date and not the current date. Secondly, if the members count exceeds 50,000, the list won't display. As with the effective as of column, the workers may not display when they view the organization with an effective date that is either before the reorganization date or after the reorganization date, if membership changes as of a future date. I won't show any live demos in the tenant. I haven't prepared any custom organizations, but here is the membership and by membership rule where you can choose to close it. And then we also have by membership rule the effective as of date. Next topic then is the organization and roles. So we have a slight change of the user interface when it comes to maintain assignable roles tasks. Renaming the usage count column to assignable role usages, and also replacing the number count with a new usage button. Using this button, you can now view additional details. No configuration is needed since this is automatically available. And in the tenant, then under the maintain assignable roles, you have the new usage button as well as the new renaming here. And when pressing this button, you can see the usages of that particular role. Moving on then, this part was covered in the introduction and is more of a cross-application topic. But since this impacts HCM core, I just wanted to touch on this super briefly. First part is pop-ups, which you might be a bit familiar with. This feature has been live before when prompting filters, for an example, when running reports. It gives you a pop-up. And for this release, they have now expanded the use of pop-ups for other tasks. However, some tasks are then excluded. You may have seen this pop-up functionality during my demo here. And next we have the People Experience homepage, and it is still possible to opt out for the Workday 2022R1 release. However, it's not really recommended. Lastly, we have the global navigation menu, which now has a new drag and drop interface for configuring it. It is also automatically enabled if you have Workday today. And just to show you real quick here, we have the People Experience homepage. Then we have the global navigation menu, which was demoed earlier, where all the apps are visible. And this is also reachable from everywhere within the tenant. And then we have the pop-ups. So for instance, if I go into Logan performance and I choose to add a goal, it will provide a pop-up here. You can see the background here, and this is then what's called a pop-up, where you can make the changes, and once you're done, it goes back to where you were. You can also, for instance, if we go here and then ask, is it add goal? Yeah, let's add a goal to employee. Now let's just Logan. It will then trigger a pop-up here. And if we go back, it returns to the page that you were on when running the task. So in short, there are some changes happening to the user experience, and this will also, in addition to the presentation before, be covered likely in the cross-application presentation. But what is changing then is the new pop-ups, which is enabled for more tasks. The feature is automatically available, and the training material might need to be overlooked when it comes to the screenshots. People Experience homepage, Workday automatically displays the new People Experience homepage and search experience. This is also automatically available, and it is possible to opt out for the upcoming release, Workday 2022 R1. And then we have the global navigation menu, which is automatically available if you have Workday Today enabled. And you can now also use the drag and drop interface to configure how the navigation options display. Next topic is some staffing enhancements. To support the migration of reference letter configurations, it is now provided new private web services. Also, collective agreements and probation period eligibility rules are enabled for OX 2.0. And moving on to the Workday 2021 R2 Plus features, we have the vaccination and workplace test tracking topic. This was launched a short while ago and is constantly improving. The updates includes vaccine tracking and the whole disease preparedness and control plans in general. And to cover the latest changes, then is that it's now possible to add vaccination and workplace test as a sub-process for the onboarding business process. This will then enable new joiners to add their vaccination statuses during onboarding. In addition, new web services to add and get vaccination details are added. These are then secured in the person data vaccination setup domain. So the summary then. So basically the upcoming change is that it is now possible to add it as a sub-process for the onboarding process. Next topic is the flexible work arrangements. I will only go through the summary page since this feature is only about a new worklet that is enabled. This worklet lets workers to self-service the task and flexible work arrangements, as well as request flexible work arrangements. What you then need to do is to configure the domain and the business process security policy. Also need to configure the business process definition, as well as all the types and subtypes. And then optionally, you can add a document category for the flexible work arrangements. And if you choose to do nothing, then nothing will happen and you won't have the functionality to track or report on workers' flexible work arrangements. I just noticed that my time is, I was a bit quicker than I anticipated. So let's go through the other features. I wrote a comment here that if we have time, but we do have time. So these are listed in the What's New report. So we have a new report field delivered in the person data for the Aboriginal and Indigenous. I haven't really looked it up how to pronounce that. Setup is required, and if you choose to do nothing, nothing will happen. Address lookup for UK is added. This is part of the Innovation Service Agreement, where they, where when writing an address, it will then auto finish the address when entering just a few characters. I will get back to this later on, but this is also part of the roadmap ahead. It is now enabled to rename in-use feedback templates. Previously was not possible to do so when the process was already in progress. So renaming is now possible, and this is automatically available. And it might impact on training material if you have stated somewhere that it is not possible to rename it while in use. We also have the forfeit one-time payments and termination processes. This will be covered in the compensation presentation later. So I will not, I included this here because the termination process is part of the staffing transactions and HCM core, but the particular one-time payment is then a compensation related topic. And what this then does is that you can withhold one-time payment, so it won't process after the termination. It is also possible to hide Workday delivered reports. You need to set up this, and it is secured under the setup tenant setup general domain then. And if you choose to do nothing, then all of the Workday delivered reports will remain visible. We then have some additional language translations within the HCM core area, which is Finnish and Swedish translations that are now available for HCM administrators as well as Workday Docs users. And this is also automatically available. And then there are some improvements in the Form I-9 for remote hire, where they have a search and document title prompt. And yeah, for an example, you can type the word passport and automatically find results that includes that particular word. And if you have or use the need the I-9 for remote hire, you need to review your settings in the maintain form I-9 settings task. And the suggested skills for job profile will be covered in another presentation, more in the talent presentation. I think it is tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, it is yeah. You can see this as kind of like a teaser for the future presentation. And now, when I accidentally rushed through like the whole presentation, I hope that it was okay. Let's talk about the roadmap. And we are closing in to the end of my presentation. I hope that you don't notice that I'm going a bit slower now. But let's talk about the roadmap and what's ahead. And for this topic, please bear in mind the safe harbor statement, especially for this particular topic. So the main themes when it comes to the HCM core roadmap are the efficiency, experience, as well as agile workforce. These themes will be the ones that Workday will focus mostly on for the upcoming releases. And in the roadmap ahead, in the experience theme, they will continue to utilize machine learning for field defaulting. They're also looking into some onboarding enhancements, as well as expanding the global address lookup, which was then available for UK now for the Workday 2022R1 release. To improve the agile workforce, they will proceed with improvements for the flexible work arrangements. It will also be some enhancements when it comes to the contingent worker staffing capabilities. The collective agreement, employee contract, and working time will be revisited and hope to improve efficiency, as well as the enhanced document generation of Workday docs for staffing processes, which I demoed earlier today. With that said, I also have to apologize to the organizers for being a bit too fast. It wasn't my intention, but I would like to thank you for joining and listening in to the HCM core presentation. And before you go, don't hesitate to contact me or my colleagues if you have any further questions. And we also, since we are a bit ahead of schedule, I would appreciate if you could scan the QR code for the short 4-question feedback questionnaire, which I will highly value. And Christina, is there any questions that I might be able to answer?
Yes, there actually is. I have noticed that there has been plenty of questions still about the people experience, and I think that we can skip them for now because Marisana will cover some more details about people experience in the cross-application services presentation, which is coming up after Joachim's session. And if those are not answered sufficiently, then I will again share the more information via email afterwards. But there is actually one question that is suited specifically to you. And it says that since you're a former HR specialist, what is your favorite feature?
Well, as you said, I'm a former HR specialist, still have kind of like a strong beating HR heart. So I must say that from the inclusive perspective, I really like the name pronunciation feature. I see a value in global organizations with the name pronunciations as well. Me myself have been well, not really changing my name, but changing my name pronunciation to suit like an international audience. So instead of having the Swedish pronunciation of Joachim, I usually go for Joachim. But from an inclusive perspective, it is good that we pronounce the names correctly. But from a technical perspective, I also like the option of correcting out of order organization assignments, since it gives more flexibility for admins to correct data and therefore improve data quality, which was something that I was very keen of in my old role. But also to bear in mind that these corrections are very powerful. So like for admins to correct the data, the admins should really know like what impact it gives, what kind of like consequences it gives when you make these kinds of corrections. Because in most of, well, from my understanding at least with the Workday setup, it's quite quite scarce and quite well, a lot of connections and so on, so you don't want to mess up anything. But this can then be constrained by only allowing the new actions to specific security groups within the security policy. So that is a good option to restrict it.